if you have a podcast, you got to really make sure the podcast is accessible. Otherwise, you just actually are reducing your revenue opportunity. So let me explain to you how to make your podcast accessible this year. Here are the general considerations I really want you to think about. When you think about the podcast accessibility, I want you to think about not just the revenue, but also a conduit, if you will, for you to actually increase your engagement, to increase your community over time. So why should your podcast be accessible in the first place? You might ask. Well, when it comes to why your podcast should be accessible, many will tell you that it's simply the right thing to do. Okay, I don't disagree with them, but the thing is that you have to really understand that when you think about podcast accessibility, it's not just about your ability to have more engagement, but you have to really understand that a podcast is a company. It's like a business. You are spending hundreds of hours every month to make sure that you are developing your podcast. So it's important to really understand that you want to make sure that your podcast has the right exposure. Both your audience and content benefit when you move towards accessibility, because not only do you open the doors to an audience that's consistently underserved but wants the content, creating accessible content also means that you are implementing best practices that you should be doing regardless. Now, the thing is that when you think about accessibility, it's not just about you making sure that you are making more money. It's about making sure that you are adding value, right? I mean, why would you spend, I think I just said this, why would you spend so many hours actually cranking up content and people are not really listening to it? I mean, the right people, not just everybody, but the right people are not able to listen to it. So accessibility helps your searchability, so your audience, both those that have additional accessibility and those that don't, can find you better. It puts your content out there in more formats for a larger audience grab. It could also be a legal requirement depending on where you are based. So this is an important element. So it's one of those things where you have to make sure that if you want to scale, and this is another keyword, scalability actually will drive content accessibility, or the other way around. If you want to grow real fast, you have to make sure that more people are able to find you, especially if you want also the Google's algorithm to actually help find you a lot faster. So let me give you some word on optimization. How do you improve your podcast accessibility? First thing first, you want to publish a transcript. I don't care how great you think your podcast is, or I don't care how great you think your voice is, or your guest were. If you don't have a transcript, you are really cutting yourself off from a large area of listeners, okay, potential listeners. So for many new to creating an accessible podcast, publishing a transcript is one of the easiest wins. Why? Because not only does publishing transcripts make podcasts more accessible, but it's also a great SEO practice. As I said earlier, you want to please also the gods of Google, but also Bing and Yahoo. Most of the keywords you like that episode to rank for are highly included after all. Okay, of course, Google is moving to a voice like a lot of folks think about. Well, should you be doing a SEO or other types of optimization? Well, one thing for sure, SEO still dominates the whole conversation. So you want to publish the transcript. So much like with the closed captions for your favorite bingeable TV series, a good podcast transcript includes more than simply what's been said. It should include anything that adds value to the overall experience, including notes about noises, sound effects, background music, and even when people chuckle, right? It's all about creating this sort of capability that you want. An AI-generated transcript is the cheapest way to go, but mistakes are bound to happen. So human-created transcripts tend to be of the highest quality, but they can get pricey. Think in the $1 per minute range and add up over time. So if you are budget strapped, you can start with an AI-generated script and give it a fine-tuned edit to make sure that everything is correct and that the meaning is conveyed properly. So that's an important element to think about. And so creating and uploading transcripts for a catalog of episodes will probably take you a decent chunk of time. So while you are in the process, you can start by publishing episode scripts if you have them. So this is an important element to think about, especially if you want to get up there real fast in terms of podcast accessibility. Another way to make your podcast accessible this year is to actually provide captions on video components. Okay, and this depends on the level of like the breadth and depth of content that you want to share with your audience. Okay, so if your podcast has a video component, providing closed captions goes a long way to making sure more people can have access. And the cool thing is that even people who are not in your native geography, they could also access the podcast. So if you are in New York, for instance, and you are able to provide captions on video components, folks in China or folks in Brazil or folks in Nigeria could actually enjoy your podcast too. And audio only shows that publish audiograms should also consider having those closed captions as well. So closed captions are not just about accessibility. Consumers are more likely to stop at a video that has actually closed captions for a few moments, even when the sound is off. So this is really good. And what about cost here? Well, cost can be on the pricier side. So for many, closed caption viewing is their preference. So I mean, members of our team, for instance, consume at least 40 to 50% of their content with captions on, and tend to steer away from content that doesn't have it available. So it's more a matter of convenience. Okay, and even if the person is a native English speaker, they still want to have this closed caption sign on, because they want to be able to have flexibility, and flexibility goes a long way to making sure that you are getting the right content, the right episode being consumed at the right time. And from an engagement point of view, you as a podcaster, that's what you want. You want to have this flexibility so that you can go back to your audience and really re-engage them over and over and over. And this also gives you flexibility, not only in terms of your geography, but also vis-a-vis the announcers, like the sponsors, the companies that could be interested in advertising on your podcast, not only in the short run, but also in the long run. The thing is, if you want to make your podcast accessible this year, you want to think about also making your content downloadable. Okay, the thing is that downloadable content in the podcasting space can be a bit of a touchy subject. There's always a chance that some jerk out there is going to take off your stuff, episodes, branding, and all, and put it on their own feed, right? This happens. But the thing is, when you think about the magnitude of this happening, it's just a lot better to actually do it yourself. It happens, but basically, if somebody is really that shitty, chances are they're not using your handy little download button to do it. Downloading content, even if there's not an option, is actually easier than you think. Okay, but if you're actually aiming for an accessible podcast, having the option to download can make a huge difference, especially if you are trying to really make your life easier for your audience. And that way, audience members may need to use a different platform to enjoy your content. If you actually are able to safeguard you can preserve the option itself. Now, when you think about downloadable content, it's also about expanding the access that you have, not only to your current listeners, but also your future listeners, because downloadability actually has a strong correlation to scalability, because you're constantly tapping into new audiences, new geographies, new and new demographics. Okay, and that's going to help you. Now, when I speak about downloadable content, you can actually do the downloadability, if that's the word, but you know what I mean. Basically, you can have the full content. You can have part of the content, so you can actually paywall a certain part of the content. You can actually you can have short snippets of your content. So if you have a 30-minute podcast, you can actually release 1 or 2 minutes for downloading, and you can actually paywall the rest, and so your paying members or members of your community can actually access the full content. So or you can also choose to make downloadable actually a portion of your catalog. So this could be a one season, two season, or just a few episodes. When you think about making your podcast accessible this year, you can actually provide a video component if you don't already. And a video component actually helps you because, see, the thing is that it helps you expand once again the niche. It helps you expand your audience because there are certain listeners who will love to actually consume your content via a different platform. Okay, I mean, with the power and the preeminence of YouTube this year, you just never know. I mean, so it's not lost on me that suggesting you add a video component to an audio-based podcast is probably the equivalent of doubling your work for sure, right? But let me tell you one thing. The thing is that when you think about YouTube, there are over 2 billion. I mean, that's billion with a B. There are over 2 billion folks logged in onto YouTube every month, and that's people actually logged in, not creepers like me who just want to watch Jimmy Fallon or Tom Hanks act out of scripts written by elementary school kids. I mean, I'm talking about folks who are engaged, folks who really want to consume your content, who are interested in the topic that you are discussing. There are folks who are very engaged in terms of monetization. In other words, they could actually constitute your future community. And when you know the direct correlation between community and monetization, that's really a powerful step here. Okay, and so basically, when you think about all those YouTube viewers, they could be podcast listeners too, especially if you have the right content. It's all about having a match between the audience and the content that you are actually sharing. And posting a video version of your podcast to YouTube extends your prospective audience by a landslide. Okay, and if you happen to have the capacity to do so, it not only makes your content more accessible, but can give you. So sorry about this. It can really give you a much larger audience, and so that's kind of cool because you are able to get things done a lot faster. So from a scalability point of view, that's really fantastic. You are able to access various geographies, various demographics a lot faster. So that's really a great opportunity. If you are trying to make your podcast accessible this year, I want you to think about providing an accessible website. And so when it comes to building an accessible website, it can get really complicated. Like hire a developer, complicated, right? Especially if you are looking to if you're looking at big components like site mapping or if you're trying to really go a little more granular in terms of site building. But the thing is that when you think about having an accessible website, you can actually have a ready-made website. You can go to a website builder, and actually just take some of the templates they have there and actually build your website real fast. And so there are actually very helpful steps that you should already be making if you want your podcast website to be more accessible. For the simple fact that when you think about when you have a website, you got to think about SEO, you got to think about discoverability, you got to think about engagement too. Okay, so when I think about when you actually are thinking about having a website, think about color contrast. You want to have also an alt text for images. That will help a lot. You want to provide alt text for non-image assets. And you also want to provide an accessible media player. That's an important element, especially if you are trying to increase the discoverability of your shows. Okay, so when I speak about good color contrast, your background should have a sufficient contrast from your text. What does sufficient contrast mean? It means that you should be able to easily read the text on the background. For example, your background is white and your text is black. So this is kind of cool. This absolutely helps make your website more accessible. But you should also already have this in place because it's just design best practice. No one wants to try to read lime green text on a white background. Think about it. That's kind of crazy, right? That's really crazy. So if your website looks like it was created in 1999 or 1989 for that matter, using a text-based HTML, I guarantee you that no one is staying on it any longer than they have to. Remember, folks nowadays are really busy, right? A lot of distractions, a lot of things to do. So think about it. Also, you want to provide alt text for images. For every image you put on your site, there's an opportunity to write what's called alt text for it. Alt text is a text description of what's going on in the picture. For example, black pug wearing birthday hat is a good alt text to describe a picture of a black pug wearing a birthday hat. So it's always great because you want to provide some kind of context around your picture. Let me give you a bonus here. When you think about making your podcast accessible, it's important to understand that there is a road to a podcast accessibility, especially if you're thinking of it in the long run. Everything has to start with a vision. In other words, why do you want to have your podcast accessible? What do you have to gain from it? And what kind of value are you adding to your audience? Because the whole thing is, it's not just about saying, I want to have my podcast accessible, but the question is, what kind of value are you getting? Are you deriving from it? Are you able to have a positive ROI? Are you able to monetize a whole accessibility process, if you will? So if you are starting from scratch with accessibility, it can seem like a long, overwhelming road, but fear not, you don't have to do it in one fell swoop. There are actually parts that can be pricey, like getting a few years worth of episodes transcribed, and also time consuming, like updating all of your website's alt text. So the best strategy is to make a plan in the first place. That goes back to what I said about vision. You got to have a vision, and you got to have a timed vision, a time-bound vision, right? So you're able to say, okay, by this quarter, I want to have this done. By this month, I want to get this done. Okay. You want to lay out the steps that you want to take towards accessibility. Figure out what you need to make to actually make that happen, and lay it out in a reasonable timeline. Timing is really critical. With no time, you are not able to move. Okay. It's okay to start small. Everyone has to start from somewhere. So that's an important element. And one thing I want to say here is that you are able to get things done. Once you have momentum, things can actually run a lot faster. But you just have to make sure to be consistent, because otherwise you're just losing a lot of momentum. Okay, and your audience is going to realize that too. Remember that when it comes to accessibility, it's not just your regular listeners who are going to enjoy your content, right? Those, you have billions of listeners out there, or at least hundreds of millions of other listeners who would love actually discovering your content. And if you set things up the right way, they will discover your content and actually, binge watch it or binge listen to it. So here's a recap to this conversation. I explained to you how to make your podcast accessible. I gave you the general considerations, the optimization, and now the bonus. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.